6 years after Sony released its first 1635 f2.8 G Master lens, we now have a G Master 2, and this is the lens review that will give you the lowdown on this particular lens. Hi, I'm Mark Gaylor and I'm a Sony Imaging Ambassador. Now, Sony have not asked me to make this video, they've had no input in what I say in this video, and they haven't seen the video prior to publication. My main aim for making this video is to give you information so you can make an informed purchasing decision. I'll be backing up what I'm saying by showing you ultra high definition examples of real world images captured on location. If you are watching other videos, make sure that their opinions are reinforced by the photographs that they're showing you. Okay, let's get started. The first four things we can say about this particular lens is that it is smaller, lighter, faster and sharper. That's not my opinion, those are undisputed facts. It is 10mm shorter than the Mark I. It is also 20% lighter. So the new lens Mark II version weighs in at 1.2 pounds or 547 grams. Now that may not be a purchasing decision that pushes you over the line, but if you're combining that with the other Mark II versions of the trinity of lenses, which includes the 2470 Mark II and also the 70-200 Mark II, you'd be running at 3/4 kilogram or 1.67 pounds lighter than running the Mark I versions. The original Mark I version was announced in May 2017, so it's been around for a few years now. Now, when that Mark I version was released, most people regarded it as the sharpest wide-angle zoom that you could buy in 2017, sharper than the Canon and Nikon equivalents of that lens. In August 2017, Lens Rentals bench tested this particular 1635 lens. Now, Roger Cicala said that this is a very good lens with interesting characteristics that I think will make it a photographer favorite. And he went on to add that it had excellent performance at 16mm focal length. Now, he went on to say that personally, he thought that it's a really good 1624mm f2.8 zoom that can be used at 35mm if you have to. Now that if you have to really reflects that the lens was not quite as sharp in the corners at the 35mm focal length as it was at the shorter focal length. So that was really the reservation of the Mark I version. Now in 2023, however, we now have the Mark II version. And as you can see from this particular example, it's going to tick a lot of boxes for a lot of photographers. Now, the performance improvements include faster focusing with those XD linear focus motors, less focus breathing, that will be useful for people using this to capture movies. It is also gimbal friendly when zooming in that it only extends 10mm when moving from the 16mm focal length to the 35mm focal length. It has improved sharpness at that 35mm focal length, and that is wide open in the corners. It is also improved close focusing. It moves from a 0.19 to 0.32 magnification ratio. Now that 0.32 magnification ratio is also the good close focusing capabilities reflected by the 2470 Mark II and the 70-200 Mark II lenses. This lens has all of the new bells and whistles that we expect from those Mark II versions, in that it has an aperture ring, it has a D-click switch so we can change the aperture without going through those clicks. We have an iris lock which we can lock it out the automatic aperture so we can control the aperture from the camera rather than the aperture ring. And again, we have the XD linear focus motors, which make this a silent focusing as well as a rapid focusing lens. Now, one of the things in the testing, I've noticed that it has excellent sun stars. Now you can see the sun stars coming off the street lights in this particular shot, and you'll be pleased to notice that I actually captured this at an f8 aperture. I didn't need to stop this down to f16 to get those particular sun stars. Now, I have worked with the original Mark I of the 1635 lens. Here I am using the lens in Canyonlands to capture this particular Mesa Arch shot here. Now, one of the things that I did notice when using this lens, if you were putting that bright sun slightly off center, you were going to get a little bit of ghosting. And if you didn't want that ghosting, you would be required to retouch that to remove those little ghosting artifacts there. And it didn't really matter in which particular scenario I was shooting with the sun off center, you're pretty much guaranteed to get those small ghosting artifacts. Sometimes not too bad, pretty much always there that needed editing out, as you can see from these particular unretouched examples that I'm showcasing here. Now, one of the things that I was pleasantly surprised in using the Mark II version, however, in this particular test shot where I put the rising sun off center, the image was pretty much free from any ghosting effects here. Now, you might see some things that initially you might think is ghosting, but actually is not. What we can see there is a little bit of backlit smoke from the rising sun. We also have some light reflections from the building opposite, and we also have some guys in workman's jackets, which again was initially I was drawn to, thinking, oh, maybe that's some of the ghosting effects that I'd need to remove. But the image is pretty much clean from those ghosting effects. One of the things that the Mark II version does share with the Mark I version, however, is that if you try and add more than one filter to the front of the lens and you're shooting at the 16mm focal length, you are going to clip the corners. Now, this will possibly be removed if you crop the image into the 16:9 aspect ratio, or you zoom slightly to 17 or 18mm. But again, if you're wanting to add an ND filter as well as a circular polarizing filter, you'll expect to get those clip corners when stacking two filters in front of this lens. Even the slimline Freewell quick swap magnetic filters that I'm using here. So you are going to be pretty much investing in one of those filter cages. Now you can get by with one of the slightly smaller filter cages that uses 100mm square filters instead of the much larger 150mm. So you are going to save a little bit of money, but it is something that you need to be aware of when shooting at 16mm with this particular lens. Now I'm going to test the sharpness of this lens, but there were going to be no surprises here. I would fully expect the new Mark II version to be excellent at that 16mm focal length. So what I did is I'm taking like a 4K crop in that bottom right hand corner. We're zooming in, and as you can see, at the maximum f2.8 aperture, we've got plenty of sharp detail, so you're not going to be disappointed when shooting wide open at that corner performance at the 16mm focal length. So one more example. This time I'll zoom into that top right here and zoom into 100% magnification, and again you can see all of the detail is more than sharp here. Excellent performance into those corners. Now this is where I was really wanting to test this lens at that 35mm focal length, which obviously was a slight weak spot of the original Mark I when shooting at maximum f2.8 aperture. So here I'm in a dark alleyway, so there is a good reason to use that maximum aperture because I'm also shooting handheld. We'll take a look at that top left hand corner this time and zoom in. Now, not many people viewing your images are going to have the opportunity to look so closely at the detail in the corners unless you're displaying these images on an 8K monitor or you're making a very, very large print. And I would say this is more than acceptably sharp, perhaps not as pin sharp as the 60mm focal length, but perhaps pleasantly sharp. So there is that 35mm f2.8 at maximum aperture and corner performance, which I think is an improvement over that Mark I version. So I'm more than happy to use this lens in a, say, a street urban environment at that 16mm focal length to get the that huge perspective that we're getting in this particular image. You could see a shadowy bicycle moving past the camera there, and also to get that steep perspective that I like about that 16mm focal length. These guys are nearly on top of the camera when I'm shooting this image, and we got those steep receding lines going across the bridge there. Fast focusing, so you can pretty much raise the camera and take a shot knowing the camera is going to snap focus almost instantaneously here, which obviously is required in this particular example of this bicycle speeding towards me. Here I've got a bit of an action shot of this guys with both his feet off the ground as he moves quickly through the scene here. And again, showing that fast focusing, it's really just point and shoot. Never in doubt whether that camera is going to snap focus because it is pretty much instantaneous. I would encourage you to move to the wide focus area in those instances and let the human detection just pick up those characters in the foreground there. Now I'm happy to use this smaller reduced version of the 1635 on a more compact camera such as the Alpha-7CR, which in this case, and I'm using this at the 16mm focal length here. I would switch over from AF to manual focus on the lens in order to do this type of work at that 16mm focal length. I find it much easier just to dial in the hyperfocal distance, just turn that focus ring until you get to 2 or 3 meters, and then you'll have the maximum depth of field from this lens without usually worrying to have to do any focus stacking. And in this particular instance, you'll see the advantage of using that hyperfocal distance technique because there isn't anything really at that 2 or 3 meter mark apart from the water sitting on the surface here in order to focus on. So that's really where that hyperfocal distance comes in use with these particular ultra wide angle focal lengths. So what are the alternative options to the 1635 GM Mark II, you might be asking? And that would be the 1224 GM, which is really designed for people perhaps looking at really extreme angle of views for perhaps architecture. For landscape type photography with the 1224, you're really going to have to be on top of your hero element in the foreground to make a dramatic landscape that actually works. We've all got those alternatives from Sigma and Tamron, which are not 1635 f2.8 versions. We've got the Sigma 1628 2.8 and also the Tamron 17 to 28. So those are for people who don't need that full focal range. Now, I'm not too sure whether these are going to be classified as sharp as the 1635 GM2, but they're obviously quite a lot cheaper than the 1635 GM2 that we now have available as well. Of course, there is an option for not having a zoom at all and just going for an ultra wide angle prime. Now, I'm a big fan of Sony's 20mm f1.8G. This is a G that behaves like a GM lens, and I'm more than happy to use this particular prime. It is obviously also lighter and cheaper than the 1635 GM2. We've also got the offering from Zeiss, the Batis f2.8. This has got it's a light lens, it's a sharp lens, and it's also got that little LED window on the barrel of the lens where we can dial in the hyperfocal distance. This is perhaps the easiest lens to actually dial in hyperfocal distance that when we're working with that particular workflow. So other offerings is if we don't need that f2.8 aperture is to use the 1635 f4G. Again, there's going to be a monetary saving and also a size and weight saving. And again, if you're shooting movies in Super 35 mode, maybe you're using 60p and you're doing a little bit of vlogging work or movie capture, then there's also the option of using the APS-C G lens, which is the E Power Zoom 1020 f4G, and again you're going to get a huge weight saving on that one. This is only about a third of the size and weight of the new 1635 f2.8 G Master. And of course, if you're invested in those compact cameras such as the Alpha 7C2 or the Alpha 7CR, then you might also go for some of the very compact ultra wide angle lenses. And we have a lot of choice here. We've got the 17mm f4 from Sigma, we've got the 18mm f2.8 from Samyang, and one of my particular favorites, and again it's an APS-C option, it's the 11mm f1.8. Now I'm more than happy to put that into my camera bag even when using full frame cameras. If I'm using an R camera, I'm shooting at 26 megapixels, and often that is more than enough resolution when I'm working on location, and I'm not checking any luggage when I'm going overseas, and that is a compact option that I'm happy to use. For the alpha photographers who have already upgraded to the Mark II versions of the 24-70 and 70-200 GM lenses, this will be a no-brainer. You'll probably just want to invest in this 16-35. For those people who have looked at my alternative and perhaps want to consider that more, you might get a little bit of help from watching my lens choice video tutorial. This is less about choosing specific lenses and more about choosing the type of lenses, whether you choose full frame lenses or APS-C lenses, zoom lenses or prime lenses, and if you are going to choose prime lenses, which prime lenses to choose. So this may give you some help. I've actually got an updated version of the lens choice video tutorial on my Patreon support channel. Now this Patreon support channel is your best source of support if you're an alpha owner looking to get good guidance. There is over 20 hours of photography seminars to watch to help build up your craft level skills when working with the alpha cameras, and you'll be able to download a 600-page ebook for your specific camera to help you work through the setup of that camera. I also make available camera setup files for the latest Sony cameras, so you can set up your camera exactly the way I outline in these ebooks, just by putting a file onto a memory card and then loading those settings. Hopefully you've got something out of this 1635 f2.8 G Master 2 video. Give me the thumbs up and I'll catch you online next time.